This is the new Sony a7R Mark V, the latest in the red resolution series, famous for its high megapixel count, infamous for destroying hard drive space. If you weren't going bankrupt taking all these high-res photos, you will now. Semi-new to the a7R series, animal and bird eye autofocus in both photo and video. Introducing car and train autofocus, airplane autofocus in both photo and video, and bug autofocus, flippin' bugs. Ew. On top of that, they're taking human face and eye autofocus to a whole nother level. No way! And it doesn't stop right there. We're getting 8K, 8-stop of in-body image stabilization. And the best darn thing about this camera? Introducing the 4-axis multi-angle LCD screen. Wow! So join us on this wondrous, magical, real-world first impressions on the new Sony a7R Mark V.
Well, we are back again here in Disneyland. I swear we're not pass holders. We should be, considering all the money we've been spending, but this is the perfect place to test it all. We got princesses, we got horses, we got roller coasters that look like trains and cars. Though I am a bit wary though. I don't think we'll find any bugs here in Disneyland, so that's gonna be a hard thing to test. Regardless though, I think there's still going to be plenty of good stuff we can test out with the brand new autofocusing system on the new Sony a7R Mark V. Ow! I'm sorry. Are you okay?
We begin to make our way from California adventures to Disneyland to find ourselves some princesses to capture. Not in a villainous sense, but in a photography sense. Now, we've come to know Sony's king in autofocus, especially with human faces and eyes. Now, one might think, how can they possibly improve on that? Well, my friends, the answer lies in AI. And not the AI you're thinking of. So no computational photography sorcery like we're seeing in smartphones, but rather AI learning. Sony pumped this camera with so much knowledge that it can predict human poses, animal behaviors, and oncoming traffic. Just to further emphasize this newfound sentience of this technology, the Sony a7R Mark V can recognize the nose, the neck, the left ear, the right ear, the left shoulder, the right elbow, the left... Okay, you get the picture. While there's no focus mode specifically for the subject's elbow, the point is, it can tell when a human subject is turned around. It will keep focus on their eyes for as long as possible, and once we're seeing the back of the head, it will focus on that, rather than focusing on the shoulder or the back, which it normally would on previous models, because that would be the nearest thing in the frame. Now, being the only two adults with no kids in line for Cinderella, we asked for the most logical thing, for Cinderella to do a princess twirl. Man, just look at how insane the face and eye tracking is keeping up. Not once did it break and went back to standard autofocusing. And the results at f1.2? Sharp AF. Now, any sensible portrait photographer are gonna comment and say, "You got her in terrible lighting." Did I? Or am I 10 steps ahead of you by also reviewing the auto exposure and the auto white balance at the same time? You fools! Did you not notice how amazing Cinderella's skin tone looked? Did you not notice how the highlights were not blown out while compensating for the shadows on her face? That is also the byproduct of the new AI processing algorithm that Sony implemented to the a7R Mark V. So sit your butt back down because we got more autofocus tests to blow your minds.
Alright, up next, we got train autofocus, and oh shoot! Absolutely insane. It just got the front of the train nailing focus. It is like, woo! I think my A1 might be in trouble.
Of course, I'm obviously kidding. The A1 still remains to be the peak alpha flagship, not only in the Sony ecosystem, but also in our hearts. I mean, we've seen how insane the A1 can perform at 30 frames per second. But the a7R Mark V, given that it's newer, it's smarter, at least with cars, trains, and planes. However, it is capped at up to 10 frames per second compressed RAW. It would have been nice to see that frames per second increase if we drop down in RAW resolution, which we can by the way, but at the very least, the buffer clears out insanely quickly thanks to its greater processing power. By the way, I am using a Sony Tough SD card, so it's nice to know that we don't have to shell out
a moderate amount of cash
for those newer, bigger CF Express Type A cards, which at 61 megapixels, we're gonna need a lot of kidneys for. But with the A7R Mark V making a statement in AI focusing, this tech will likely spread to the next A9 and A1 models, which those will take full advantage of the advanced and smarter object tracking combined with their insane burst. Alright, let's take a break from the autofocus stuff for now and talk image quality. You already know it's gonna be good. 61 megapixels, zoom in and get all those juicy details. And I've always appreciated that about the A7R series. You can always crop in and readjust your photos without degrading the quality much, and there are more pixels to sample off of if you work in Photoshop. Some of my favorite photos still look amazing to this day from the previous A7Rs because of their larger megapixel in nature. By the way, when this video is out, we will already be back in Japan for some more autumn leaves action. So be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, and follow the Vong along. But while it's the same amount of megapixels as the previous A7R Mark IV, I feel the 5 doesn't need a megapixel bump. So it's great that Sony concentrated elsewhere, like making the focusing smarter and the processing faster. What is welcome though is the fact that you can now select smaller RAW files, something we've been desperately asking for since the original A7R. All that megapixel is nice, but we don't always need it, especially for the more casual shoots. At lossless medium, we get a nice middle ground of 26 megapixels, available both in full frame and APS-C mode. In full frame mode, the 26 megapixels just look extra crispier as it oversamples from the 61. And in APS-C, it's still just as good. In fact, that's always been the best thing about the A7R series, the fact that you can get the best of both worlds, full frame and APS-C.
This fly might be the best chance I have at bug autofocus, but I think I need a macro for this because it's not working. It's not doing anything.
I don't think this is intended for fly photography.
It said insect photography and I classified that as an insect. And I lost it.
No one wants photos of flies.
I don't think so too. I wouldn't even want that. Insect photography? They picked the worst person to test this new camera out. I hate bugs. Alright, so we have found out that Sony invented intergalactic autofocus. We got a Wookiee autofocus, we got R2 autofocus. But somehow, I haven't seen any bugs yet. And I don't think we'll be able to do that test here at Disneyland. I just don't think there's any bugs out here. They just keep it way too clean, so...
We should go to Bugs Land.
You would think we will find some bugs in Bugs Land, but it turns out that they completely removed it for Avengers Campus, so no more Bugland here in Disney, California.
What about Spider-Man?
That's our bug right there! Let's go!
As we go to try to find our favorite insect web-sling superhero as a desperate attempt to get a proper insect autofocus test, something magical happens. Out of nowhere comes Jiminy Cricket leaping into our existence. My lord, what a magnificent creature. The Disney photography gods have blessed us with the impossible, the improbable, the subject for our insect autofocus test.
Alright, so we're trying to get like horse photos and the autofocus was working really well. And then we're like, how are we gonna get bugs to test out the feature? And out of nowhere, Jiminy Cricket just jumped into the shot and I was like, oh my god, we got it!
So clearly that is not Jiminy Cricket, but rather his long-lost cousin, Hop the Grasshopper, from a forgotten cartoon, The Grasshopper and the Ants. A story about a playful grasshopper who did not want to prepare for winter and ultimately had to be saved by his hard-working ant friends. And that's why he moved here to California, for the good weather and for the free food. A luxury that this incredibly photogenic duck is clearly enjoying. My lord, you can literally see the reflection in its eyes.
Wow, we are just blessed with like animal and insect subjects here. We got like this very photogenic duck that's just like eating, and we're getting like such perfect test shots of the eye, the body, the head, and you can just like get so micro specific with what you want the camera to focus on. It is insane. I love it.
Now, just to show you that I'm not kidding, you can literally select in the menu what you want the camera to solely focus on. You can choose the shifting range, the persistence level, the sensitivity, and for animal body parts. And not to mention the amount of new items that you can assign to your custom buttons. But instead of listing it all, I will just tell you some of my favorites.
All right, it looks like we got it right here. Proof that we got insect autofocus. All right, ready? Check it out. Spidey. Green, autofocus, insect, autofocus. Oh! Test complete.
You can assign a button where you can cycle through all of the different subject recognition autofocus. On top of that, you can actually program a button to literally turn off subject recognition and still use the standard autofocus. And touch tracking autofocus no longer has to be touch activated and can be assigned to be triggered via a button. There is a all-in-one silent mode, which is nice. And we now have the double-decker mode dial that we first saw on the A7 IV, and with it, we can program the custom 1, 2, and 3 profiles for each of the different modes. It is honestly overwhelming how much customization you can do on this camera. But by far, my favorite thing about the A7R Mark V, and literally the only thing that puts me on the edge of getting it, the 4-axis multi-angle LCD screen. This is literally the best of both worlds. If you love the tilt-only style screen, you can just use that. If you love the flippy style screen, you can just use that. No longer do we have to have this debate anymore. For me, I personally love both. There are advantages to both. If I'm vlogging or want to shoot photos or make TikToks in vertical orientation, the flip out style screen is immensely helpful for that. If I'm mainly working behind the camera, I much prefer the tilt only style screen, as the flip screen gets more in the way. This screen will unify things. This will bring us world peace because it's really intuitive. And honestly, when they put this in the next A7S and the A1, oh yeah baby, I'm upgrading to it. What's also a huge improvement is the in-body image stabilization. It's still 5-axis, but it's now offering up to 8-step in compensation. Here's me reacting a scene from The Lion King, raising the A7R V with a 70-200 G Master Mark II like Simba. So here's the clip with no stabilization, standard stabilization, and active stabilization. Now, by all accounts, this is a hefty setup to hold in this position for too long, and it's doing an amazing job compensating for my weak arms. So here's something a little easier with a 24-70 G Master Mark II. This lens does not have optical steady shot. Here it is at 24 with no stabilization, standard stabilization, and active stabilization. Keep in mind that the active stabilization still crops you in about 10%, but well worth the trade for extra stability. Now, I personally do a lot of these fake slider shots handheld in a lot of my videos, and these just look really smooth.
We've got eyes on you.
Oh shoot, I think he knows I'm using the brand new Sony a7R Mark V. Unfortunately, the rolling shutter in APS-C mode is still pretty bad on the A7R V. In full frame mode, it's less apparent. Since we're talking about video now, as expected, we're getting 10-bit 422 600 megabits per second all-eye in video recording. Wow, we got 14 plus stop of dynamic range with S-Log 3. Cool! And yes, we have S-Cinetone. Awesome! We can do 16-bit raw output up to 4K 60p with a compatible Atomos external recorder. Yay! This also has the new breathing compensation for compatible Sony lenses. I'm literally grasping for air. But what I didn't expect is 8K. Wow, 8K! And I mean, it's gotta live up to its name, right? A7R, R stands for resolution, though it's only at 24p 10-bit 420. Oh, well now hang on, it's not a big deal. It's a nice option to have. The ability for normal consumers like you and I to shoot and process 8K is relatively still at its infancy. Most cameras are still barely giving us 4K 60p, which brings me to my next talking point. The A7R V can shoot in 4K 60p, but only in full frame mode. This is a huge miss in my opinion, considering that we get 6.2K oversampling in APS-C Super 35 mode when shooting in 4K. While it can be argued that 4K 60p is at least available in full frame mode, As a longtime A7R hybrid shooter, the best thing about this series has always been its hybrid capabilities, including utilizing APS-C mode to either get an extra reach with our full-frame lenses or straight up just use APS-C lenses while maintaining all the best video features. With that said, no, the A7R5 does not need 4K 120. We do have to draw the line somewhere, and that can be reserved for more video-centric cameras. However, all I'm asking is just to standardize 4K 60p, as it's been nearly 8 years since 4K 30 landed in the hands of the consumers. Aside from that, what is exciting for videographers and filmmakers is that a lot of the AI autofocusing is also available in video mode. So if you shoot a lot of animals or car commercials or trains and planes, the autofocus can recognize and keep up with those subjects. Anyways, let's move on to overheating, or lack of. The A7R5 uses the same, if not similar, heat dissipation design like the A7S III and the A1. Just make sure to set the auto power temp to high in the options if you plan on doing any sort of long form recordings, which, by the way, will prompt you when you first turn on your camera. At 8K 24p, I was able to juice out 2 of my 128GB SD cards. That's a little over 2.5 hours of recording with no heating symbol showing up. And that goes double for the 4K 60p as well. Both tests I had the camera charging via USB-C. By the way, here are the port options. And speaking of ports,
You know, I kind of think it's a little discriminatory of them to not include boats.
we have cars, we have train autofocus, we pretty much got air, land, but not sea covered. Like, that seems like an odd thing to leave out, don't you think?
Maybe boats are too slow.
There's faster boats, like, what,
The Going Merry.
We're not gonna do a One Piece reference on this channel, okay?
What?
And speaking of boats, we're gonna be on one.
Time for some low light tests.
Autofocus and low light have tremendously improved. According to Sony, it can find focus as low as -4 EV. And the best test I can do is to go on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, which is notoriously dark and certainly will give your average consumer cameras issues when it comes to focusing. Not that you want to be taking any photos on this ride anyway if you're easily susceptible to nightmares. And I'm not talking about from these skeletons. But the A7R5 locks on focus quite well on these animatronics, including the devious Captain Jack Sparrow. Ahoy, mateys! I guess we can call this the A7R Mark V. Let's quickly move on to pixel shifting. Not something I personally use, but the latest improvement on this is that it can automatically detect and correct small pixel movements such as people and leaves in images during compositing.
I gotta say, shooting at like half a second handheld is amazing. The new IBIS is doing wonders for this camera. Ooh.
And boy, let me tell ya, shooting handheld at such a slow shutter speed opens up a lot of possibilities. It keeps us from pushing our ISO too high, and it creates a decent amount of motion blur. Well, after a 13-hour day here in Disneyland, I think it's time for us to wrap things up. So price and availability. $3,900 US, and it will be available December of this year. While I am impressed with the performance of this new camera, obviously, it's not gonna be for everybody. Yes, it has many amazing features, including the most up-to-date AI autofocusing, the 4-axis LCD screen, the 8-step IBIS, but a lot of this will likely get spread to the other models in due time, and I'll be patiently waiting for them to arrive. A lot of the new AI autofocusing is great, but not a lot of people are going to be shooting cars, trains, planes, and Jiminy Crickets. There are photographers out there who do specialize in those areas, and they would benefit greatly with those new subject varieties, but for most, it's likely just portraits, animals, and landscapes, which a lot of the current Sony models already excel in. And if you're an A7R4 owner, you can likely skip this one unless you can take advantage of the better buffer, the variety of focus subjects, and everything else that we talked about in this video. Or if you're in the crowd who's been waiting and wanting to upgrade to a higher megapixel Sony model and you're keen on a lot of the new features, then this is an excellent upgrade, especially with the latest menu system, CF Express Type A compatibility, and amazing AI focusing system that will last you for at least half a decade.
Well guys, it's been an incredible day. We got amazing princess portraits, we got amazing train and cars photos, even duck photos, and we even got our one insect photo, Jiminy Cricket, saving the day. even though it is a grasshopper and not really a cricket. We're incredibly exhausted. We can't even keep up with how well this camera performs. So A7R 5 guys, and thank you so much for watching. We'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to create beautiful websites. No coding knowledge whatsoever. Perfect for people like me because I just want to make YouTube videos for you guys and not have to worry about coding my entire website. Simply just select one of their templates to get started. Every aspect is easily customizable with their drag and drop feature. Whether you're in need of a portfolio, an e-commerce store, or even a simple blog, design it with Squarespace. Use my link down below to test it out, and when you're ready to launch your first website or domain, use my code JasonVong to save 10% off. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.